abandoned places are only scary because of ghost stories. But the truth is, the real fear starts when you realize you might not actually be alone inside them. Over the years, the narrator had heard every kind of urban legend imaginable. Stories about abandoned military villages hidden in the woods, strange figures watching people through broken windows, and old homes where something still moved long after everyone was supposed to be gone. Like most people, he always assumed those stories were exaggerated, something fun to talk about with friends late at night. But after several terrifying encounters spread across different years of his life, he slowly started questioning whether some places really do hold on to something dark after being abandoned. What makes these stories unsettling isn't just the possibility of something paranormal, it's the realism behind them. Every location felt real. Every moment started out completely normal before turning into something impossible to explain. From an abandoned military village where shadowy figures silently surrounded a group of teenagers, to a collapsing house where an old woman hummed in the darkness before vanishing, to the silhouette of a dead man appearing in the window of his abandoned home years after his death. None of these moments made sense then, and they still don't make sense now. The worst part is that in almost every encounter there were witnesses, other people who saw the same thing, other people who heard the same noises, which makes it much harder to dismiss as imagination. And once those experiences happen, they stay with you forever. In the narrator's hometown, there was one place every kid knew about, even if they had never actually seen it themselves. Hidden somewhere near the airport sat an abandoned military village that had been left untouched for decades. During World War II and the Cold War, hundreds of military families supposedly lived there before the entire area was suddenly abandoned in the 1980s. Over time, the place became less like an old neighborhood and more like a forbidden legend passed around between kids at school. Nobody seemed to know exactly where it was located, but everyone had heard terrifying rumors about it. Some people claimed cults secretly gathered there at night. Others swore there were underground tunnels beneath the church where military experiments had taken place years earlier. The lack of real information only made the stories spread faster. When the narrator was younger, his older brother once claimed he had actually explored the village with friends. One night, while trying to scare him and his friends, his brother described entering the abandoned church and finding a hidden trap door near the altar. According to him, strange screams and moaning noises echoed from beneath the floorboards, like someone was trapped underground. Even though the story sounded ridiculous, the way he told it felt real enough to terrify everyone listening. For years after that, the abandoned village became an obsession among the narrator and his friends. They constantly promised each other that once they were old enough to drive, they'd finally track the place down themselves. At the time, it sounded exciting. None of them expected that years later they would actually find it and discover that the real danger wasn't coming from ghost stories at all. By senior year of high school, the abandoned village had become almost mythical among the narrator's friend group. They had spent years talking about exploring it, but nobody ever knew where the entrance actually was. The area around the airport was huge and filled with restricted roads, security fences, and no trespassing signs. Even though the base had supposedly been abandoned for decades, everyone still believed getting caught there could lead to serious trouble. That uncertainty kept most people away. Then, one night, one of the narrator's friends suddenly claimed he finally knew how to get inside. According to him, somebody had secretly shown him the location of the old entrance road hidden deep near the edge of the property. Late that night, the group drove out to search for it. At first, it felt pointless. Every few feet, the friend would insist they had found the right road, only for it to lead nowhere. But eventually, they spotted an overgrown dirt path hidden behind trees with an old rusted no trespassing sign barely visible underneath branches. The second they pulled onto that road, the atmosphere immediately changed. The narrator shut off the headlights and slowly rolled the car forward through the darkness. Before long, they reached an abandoned checkpoint gate. Nobody was there. No guards, no lights, nothing except silence. After manually lifting the gate themselves, they continued deeper into the property. Along the roadside sat piles of discarded furniture scattered everywhere, like entire families had suddenly vanished. Beds, tables, dressers, broken chairs. The deeper they drove, the stranger everything looked. Then they reached a second checkpoint gate. Once they crossed it, they officially entered the abandoned village itself, and the feeling that settled over the group at that moment was something none of them would ever forget. The village looked completely frozen in time. Rows of empty homes stretched along cracked streets, while weeds pushed through sidewalks and porches collapsed inward from years of decay. Some buildings looked completely destroyed, while others still appeared strangely intact, almost like people had just stepped out for the day and never returned. The silence made everything feel worse. There were no sounds except the occasional creaking of old wood moving in the wind. The group parked near the abandoned church first because that building had always been at the center of the town's rumors. Inside, graffiti covered nearly every wall. Pieces of broken glass crunched under their shoes while moonlight shined through shattered, stained windows. Even the narrator searched near the altar, hoping to find the trap door his older brother described years earlier, but there was nothing there besides rotting floorboards and dust. After leaving the church, the group started exploring nearby homes. Walking through them felt deeply unsettling because many still contained personal belongings. Some had furniture left exactly where it had been decades earlier. One house still had old dishes sitting in kitchen cabinets, while another contained children's toys scattered across the floor. The homes that remained intact were somehow scarier than the destroyed ones because they made it feel like the people who lived there had disappeared suddenly without warning. Throughout the exploration, one of the narrator's friends named Scott became increasingly nervous. He kept insisting that somebody else was nearby watching them. The others laughed it off and blamed his paranoia on all the ghost stories surrounding the village. But then, while standing silently inside one of the houses, the entire group heard something that instantly changed the mood. Slow footsteps creaking across wood somewhere nearby. Not random house noises, actual footsteps. And the second one of them yelled out asking if anyone was there, the sound immediately stopped. After hearing the footsteps inside the abandoned house, the entire group became tense. Nobody wanted to admit how scared they suddenly were, but the atmosphere had completely changed. What started as an exciting late-night adventure now felt genuinely dangerous. The narrator tried convincing himself the sounds were just the house settling or animals moving through the walls, but deep down, even he knew the noises sounded far too deliberate for that. One friend still insisted they should continue exploring, while Scott became more convinced than ever that somebody else was nearby. Eventually, the narrator decided he'd had enough and told everyone they needed to leave immediately. The uneasy feeling in his stomach kept getting worse by the second. As the group prepared to leave the house, Scott suddenly froze near one of the windows. Quietly, he pointed toward the neighboring building outside. Moving along the wall were several dark shadows shaped like human figures. The silhouettes drifted silently across the outside of the house before disappearing toward the backyard. Every person inside the room saw them. The realization hit instantly. They were not alone inside the abandoned village. Without even discussing it, the group agreed to make a run for the car. They burst out the front door and sprinted through the darkness toward where they had parked. But just when the vehicle came into view, Scott screamed louder than anyone had ever heard before. Standing beside the backseat door was a tall woman wearing a filthy black dress. One leg was already inside the vehicle, like she had been trying to climb in unnoticed. The second she heard them approaching, the woman released the car door and ran directly into the abandoned church nearby. Nobody chased her. Nobody even spoke. The group jumped into the car and sped away as fast as possible, nearly crashing while fishtailing down the dirt roads. Years later, the narrator still thinks about how terrifying the situation really was. They had spent nearly an hour exploring the village without seeing a single sign of life. No lights, no voices, no movement. Yet somehow there were people silently watching them the entire time. And what disturbs him most is the question he still can't answer. Why was that woman trying to get inside the car? Years later, after starting a new relationship, the narrator found himself getting dragged into a completely different obsession. His girlfriend loved paranormal investigations and constantly searched for abandoned locations rumored to be haunted. Unlike her, he never truly believed in ghosts. Most of the time, he only tagged along because he enjoyed spending time with her. Together, they explored countless abandoned places, including old factories, decaying homes, and forgotten buildings hidden deep in rural areas. Most turned out exactly how he expected: creepy but harmless. Empty structures filled with dust, graffiti, and strange noises caused by animals or collapsing walls. Over time, he became desensitized to almost all of it. That confidence disappeared the night they discovered an isolated house sitting completely alone in the middle of nowhere. The house looked like it should have collapsed years earlier. Boards covered the entrance, parts of the roof were caving inward, and several windows had shattered long ago. The narrator immediately felt uncomfortable about entering because the building seemed physically dangerous, not because he feared ghosts. After forcing the front door open, they stepped into what used to be the living room, only to discover that half the floor had collapsed into the basement below. A massive hole stretched across the center of the room, exposing dark, empty space underneath the house. He repeatedly told his girlfriend they should leave before somebody fell through the floor, but she brushed off every concern and continued exploring deeper inside. Eventually, she convinced him to search upstairs while she investigated another room downstairs. Reluctantly, he climbed the unstable staircase, unaware he was about to encounter something he still cannot explain years later. At the top of the stairs, the narrator entered an old bedroom that looked almost untouched despite the condition of the rest of the house. A neatly made bed still sat against the wall, with a folded bathrobe placed carefully near the foot of it. Dust covered everything, yet the room somehow felt recently occupied. In one corner, he discovered a crawl space filled with old baby supplies, including diapers, baby food containers, and toys covered in cobwebs. The sight alone felt disturbing, but what unsettled him more was the sound he suddenly heard while preparing to leave. A slow creaking noise echoing from somewhere deeper inside the walls. At first, he assumed it was rodents moving around inside the crawl space, but the closer he listened, the more rhythmic the sound became, like wood creaking beneath the weight of someone rocking slowly back and forth. Following the noise, he made his way toward the second bedroom across the hallway. The sound grew louder with every step. When he finally reached the doorway, he froze completely. Sitting inside the room was an old woman rocking slowly in a chair while staring out the window into the darkness outside. He could only see the back of her head and the outline of her long skirt illuminated faintly by moonlight. The entire situation felt impossible. The house was practically collapsing. The front door had been boarded shut, yet somehow this woman sat there calmly, as if she had always belonged inside the house. Nervously, the narrator apologized and explained they didn't know someone lived there. The second he stepped closer, the rocking abruptly stopped. Several seconds later, the chair slowly began moving again. The narrator tried asking if she was okay, but once more the rocking stopped instantly. This time, the woman slowly stood up from the chair while making a low humming sound under her breath. Then, without warning, she turned toward him so quickly that it made him physically jump backward in fear. He only caught brief glimpses of wrinkled skin and hollow features before panic took over completely. He sprinted downstairs, screaming for his girlfriend to leave immediately. But when she returned upstairs moments later to prove he was exaggerating, the room sat completely empty, at least until they both heard the rocking chair begin moving again behind them. At first, the narrator's girlfriend laughed at him when she entered the bedroom and found nothing there besides an empty rocking chair. She teased him for being terrified of an old abandoned house and insisted his imagination had gotten the better of him. The narrator tried desperately explaining what he saw, but even while speaking, he started questioning himself. Maybe the darkness had distorted his vision. Maybe stress and adrenaline had caused him to misinterpret something ordinary. But deep down, he knew there had absolutely been somebody sitting in that chair moments earlier. Before either of them could continue arguing, a slow creaking noise echoed through the room once again. Both of them instantly went silent. The rocking chair behind them had started moving on its own, slowly back and forth. Creak, creak, creak. Then came the humming, soft and low at first, almost like someone quietly singing to themselves from inside the darkness. The narrator watched his girlfriend's expression change immediately from amusement to complete fear. Without saying anything, she slowly stepped toward the bedroom doorway to look inside again. The second she reached the entrance, she froze. Sitting inside the chair once more was the same old woman, rocking gently while humming to herself exactly like before. This time there was no denying it, because they were both staring directly at her. Neither of them tried speaking to the woman again. Fear completely took over. They turned and ran downstairs together before sprinting out of the collapsing house as fast as possible. Once inside the car, the narrator's girlfriend repeatedly asked what they had just seen, but he had no answer. The strangest part to him wasn't just the woman herself, it was how impossible her presence felt. The house had been boarded shut, the floors were collapsing, the rooms were covered in years of decay. There was no sign that anyone could realistically survive there, yet somehow the woman appeared, disappeared, and then returned again only moments later. Even years afterward, both of them still talk about that night because neither has ever been able to come up with a rational explanation for what happened inside that house. When the narrator was younger, his family moved into a neighborhood that at first seemed perfect. The house was bigger than their old one, and the neighborhood was full of kids around his age. But almost immediately, one neighbor became a problem. An elderly man living directly next door seemed to hate every child in the neighborhood. Anytime kids played football or rode bikes near his property, he would begin screaming from inside the house and banging violently on the windows. Even if nobody actually stepped onto his lawn, he reacted as if they were destroying his property. Over time, the narrator and his friends became used to the constant outbursts, joking about the man behind his back while avoiding his house whenever possible. Eventually, the old man became less like a neighbor and more like a terrifying presence everyone in the neighborhood simply tolerated. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. For weeks, nobody saw him or heard banging from the windows anymore. At first, the narrator and his friends joked that maybe the old man had finally died. But one early morning, while staying over at the narrator's house, his friend Joel woke up to flashing lights outside the bedroom window. Looking through the bedroom window, they watched paramedics wheel a zipped body bag out of the old man's house. In that moment, the joking instantly stopped feeling funny. What disturbed the narrator most was the feeling that the old man might have been dead inside that house for weeks before anyone found him. After that night, the home remained abandoned for years. Nobody cleaned it out, nobody sold it. Every light stayed off, while all of the old man's belongings remained untouched inside. The abandoned house became deeply unsettling for the narrator because his bedroom window faced directly toward it. At night, he could clearly see inside several rooms, including the room where he later broke in as part of a dare from friends. Inside, everything looked frozen exactly the way the old man left it. Books remained open, clothes hung over chairs, dust covered every surface. The smell inside the home was overwhelming and sickening, making the narrator immediately think the old man may have died there long before anyone discovered him. Then, while exploring deeper inside, he suddenly heard a loud crashing noise from another part of the house, a noise that sounded unmistakably human. And later that same night, something appeared inside the dead man's home that none of them would ever forget. Later that night, after breaking into the abandoned house, the narrator and his friends tried moving on from the experience and eventually fell asleep. But sometime during the early morning hours, Joel suddenly woke the narrator, claiming he kept hearing strange noises coming from next door. At first, the narrator dismissed him completely, assuming fear and imagination were causing him to overreact. Then, both of them heard it clearly, two loud knocks echoing through the silence outside. The narrator immediately sat up and looked toward the abandoned house through the bedroom window. At first, he couldn't see much because of the darkness, but Joel suddenly pointed toward one of the rooms and whispered that someone was standing there. Inside the abandoned house, a dark silhouette stood motionless in the doorway of the same room the narrator had explored earlier that evening. The figure was too dark to identify clearly, but it looked unmistakably human. The narrator tried convincing everyone it was probably just a shadow or a coat rack blending into the darkness. Then Joel started panicking, insisting he had just seen the figure move. His reaction woke the other friends sleeping in the room, and soon everyone gathered around the window staring toward the abandoned house. That's when the figure slowly stepped forward from the doorway and moved directly in front of the window. There was now no denying that it resembled the silhouette of a person standing silently inside the dead man's home. The room erupted into panic as everyone watched the figure slowly move back toward the darkness before disappearing completely from sight. Nobody could explain what they had just witnessed. The narrator tried calming everyone down by suggesting maybe the old man's son had finally returned to the property, but even he didn't believe his own explanation. The timing felt impossible. The house had sat untouched for years. No lights had ever appeared before, and whoever or whatever stood in that window moved in complete silence before fading back into darkness without another sound. Nearly a year later, the narrator finally met the old man's son while he cleaned out the property before selling it. According to him, he had avoided returning because of his terrible relationship with his father. But even after hearing that explanation, the narrator still cannot explain what he and his friends saw standing inside that abandoned house that night.